Hi, Kim Buck. How are you today?
I am well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We have lots more to talk about around prodependence, don't we?
We do. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for those of you who have shown up to join the conversation today. Um, we had an exciting week last week. Dr. Rob and I presented at it's called the ITAP conference, but it's for addiction professionals all over the world, and it's a pretty big deal. It's here in Arizona, but had the opportunity to present on prodependence and answer a lot of questions and created a lot of buzz and excitement amongst the therapy world who work with addiction. So it was kind of an exciting week. So we're kind of coming off of that, but happy to be here and kind of talk through some things, answer questions if you have any. So please kind of participation makes these webinars much more interesting, I think, than me just talking the whole time.
And the Q&A is at the bottom of your screen, so you know the drill. Go ahead and type in any questions that you want to ask. But to your point, yes, it's great when you have an opportunity to talk to professionals about this so that they have an understanding. We receive messages all the time from loved ones, partners, spouses that are saying, I need to find a prodependent aligned therapist because I think there's a lot of really well-meaning therapists that have used a codependent language. In fact, I just talked to somebody this morning and they were talking about, that they had been told that they were part of the problem and the therapist wanted to look at their family of origin issues and all of that right off the bat. And I think that that's really painful for partners. And I know you've experienced that with, clients that you work with as well.
Absolutely. Prodependence is such an exciting new way to look at the healing journey for family members and partners of people who are affected by addiction. I happen to work a lot with people, partners and loved ones of sex addicts, people who are struggling with sexual compulsivity. I also work with the addict themselves. So that's kind of my wheelhouse, but prodependence applies to anybody who's dealing with a family member or loved one who's having a struggle. Addiction, with its alcohol or drugs or sex or any sort of compulsivity, even mental illness. Sometimes just working with a family member who's struggling with mental illness can really disrupt the family system and create a lot of hurt and pain and fear. So a lot of the same things a partner would experience if they were experiencing betrayal. Little different dynamic, but prodependence still applies. And so we'll try and so please know that your questions or your thoughts, and you may be here for a variety of reasons, but they're all welcome, and I'll do my best to answer those, and they don't have to be on topic. So if you've been sitting on something and you would like a little feedback or education or ideas about that, Tammy and I together, we can do our best to maybe help fill those for you. So please feel free there. Prodependence, just as a quick summary, like Tammy was just saying, it's a little bit different. It's a lot different than traditional codependent treatment, which is what's been around forever. It's kind of a different way. It's a different paradigm to look at treatment. So early on, we kind of avoid, from a codependence place, we avoid talking about, lots and lots of in-depth analysis and talk about your family of origin, maybe some of the trauma you grew up with. There is oftentimes people who are in these situations do have histories of family who maybe had struggled, with addiction as well, or trauma of some sort, but not everyone. That's really important to know. So if you're sitting there thinking, no, my childhood is pretty good, I don't have a mom and dad, that's okay. Not everybody does. Prodependence also doesn't blanket and put everybody in a box that way. So if not, and you just happen to have married somebody who has this struggle or has developed this problem or came to the relationship with it, or you have a child who's battling, or a parent, family, or anybody, even a close friend or a colleague or somebody that you really care about, we are going to look at it. It doesn't mean that you have trauma and that's why you're friends, or that's why you are with this person, or that's why your child, acts the way he or she might. It just means that there sometimes is that background. But in codependent, from a codependent perspective, we don't look at all that in the early stages. We're looking really just to figure out how to stabilize and ground you so that you can make big decisions. Most people are in that place. You know, they're trying to decide, what do I do with this person? How do I be helpful, or should I be helpful? How do I love them when, you know, I'm really upset at them and I'm really angry and I really just sometimes want to run away. Or so those are all pretty normal feelings for being in a relationship with somebody who's battling. And addiction is mental illness. It's a form of mental illness, for sure. It took us a long time to recognize that and treat it as such, but it is. The beautiful thing is it can be treated. It's not a fast repair, because normally hasn't been a short amount of time it took us to get there, or the addict to get there, but it can be healed, and it can be, you can heal, and you can learn and grow and become a functioning, much more healthily functioning human being. It just takes a lot of work, a lot of love, a lot of support, and a lot of courage on both the addict part and the family member. So if we don't have any questions, we can tell me.
I just want to jump in on what you said. It takes a lot of love, and it takes other people supporting each of you too, because you can't be there for each other. There's times when you can't be there for the addict, you know, like you're too hurt by their behavior, their betrayal, and everything else, and that's okay. I want I want you to hear that message of it's, you know, because here's another thing. I get a lot of people going, I know I did this wrong. I know that I should be, you know, supportive. I should do whatever and I'm like, Dr. Rob always talks about, you know, there's nothing that a partner can do or cannot do that's going to change what the addict does. So it's not about that. And it's not if you were better or if you had done this, then that, and the addicts would rather have you be thinking along those lines if you just did whatever, and it's all your fault. So I want to say you deserve love, and the addict needs love and support too. But that doesn't mean that you guys are the best people, especially early on, to be in those positions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even though logic would say, I'm the partner, I'm the mother, I'm the friend, I should be able to influence this person to, when individuals are in addictive or compulsive places or mental illness, they're often not in their higher thinking brain. We call that the executive function, the frontal cortex, the part of our brain that says, this isn't right. I might hurt somebody's feelings. I might die. They're not thinking that. Addiction lives in the part of the brain that we call the limbic system. And that is the automatic, that's a part of our brain that tells our heart to beat and our eyes to blink and our lungs to take a breath. It's not voluntary. And so if you ask somebody who's engaging in self-destructive behavior, why are you doing that? Or what were you thinking? They most likely will look at you with a blank stare, or they'll lie. They'll make something up just to answer your question. But if they are functioning in this part of their brain, that means this is underdeveloped. And a lot of recovery for somebody who struggles is redeveloping the executive function of their brain. To tell them to slow down. Oh, this isn't appropriate. I probably should call someone first. I probably should get out of the house and go exercise, or I should whatever. So that takes executive function. That takes thought and planning and steadiness and balance. And that's just a rewiring of the brain. And it's really, so we don't fix that as loved ones and partners. That's their journey to discover and figure out, but we certainly can invite by putting ourselves in the healthiest place possible. I think we invite the people we love into a healthier space with us. And there are things we can do to be helpful, for sure. We just have to know what those limits are. And sometimes it just takes some help I think as a family member or partner, it just takes getting a little bit of help of our own to talk through that with somebody who can guide you and help you, particularly a therapist, support group. I will harp on that. I've done that in all of my webinars. We cannot overstate the importance of good support. And the fact you guys are here is amazing. I hope you keep coming back. It's one resource. It's kind of weird. I'm of the older generation, so I like being face to face, but I'm learning how to do this, so I'm going out of my box. So that is a really important thing I want you guys, that I think would be for you guys to know, is your loved one has to develop the part of the brain that hasn't been injured by the addiction. In fact, a few years back, they actually I can't remember who, American Addiction Society?
American Society of Addiction Medicine.
Yes.
ASAM. I quote them all the time.
Yes. And so they redefined addiction as essentially an injury to the reward center of the brain. So that part, that reward center gets injured by too much pleasure, whether it's sex, drugs, whatever it is. So, but our brain is so healable and plastic, and it can move, and it just takes time. So that being said, if there's no questions yet, I kind of thought maybe I would bring up, we could talk a little bit about one of the exercises that I teach to partners in the recovery the healing world for partners, as I'm working with them both in group and individually. And I many of you probably already love her, but this comes from a Brene Brown. We talk a lot about Brene Brown. And as I've written some curriculum for partners in my own little world in my office, because we have a lot of partners groups there, I've integrated a lot of Brene Brown's work because it's so relevant, both to the addict and let's just face it, it's relevant to everyone who's breathing. So what I want to talk to, maybe just introduce today, if you haven't already been introduced to it, is something that comes out of her Braving the Wilderness book. I don't know which number that is, second to the last, I think. And her whole book is, that whole book is about belonging, and this idea about we have such a need to belong, that is one of our greatest human needs. And in fact, the number one motivator for human behavior, believe it or not, is the need to belong. That motivates us more than anything. This is why for addicts and even people who are recovering, who are in relationship to them, getting support is so key and crucial. It's also why the injury is so deep when addiction happens in a relationship. So one of the concepts she talks about in this book, it's an acronym, and it's called Braving. She calls it Braving. And, Brene is all about courage and showing up and, taking risks, getting in the arena, rumbling with your truth, rumbling with your struggle, and finding people who are also in the arena, who are rumbling and, getting beat up a little, because they will best understand your struggle. And she uses Braving to describe trust. And it's an acronym to describe, she breaks it down to called the anatomy of trust. And I love Braving because in relationships, when relationships are failing, or when they're struggling, or when there's been betrayal or deceit or lies or attachment wounding, obviously one of the very first things that gets injured is our sense of trust, our sense of, I don't know what to trust anymore. I don't know if I can trust what is said, what this person does, what I feel almost like I'm free falling there. I don't know where the ground of trust is. And she suggests that it's important that we break down trust. Sometimes when we're in relationship with somebody who is struggling, we might want to just say, I don't trust you at all. And sometimes we don't in any way. But sometimes there's elements of trust that are wounded, and there's some elements that aren't. And she's suggesting that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we kind of break that down. And I found that very useful in my own life as I've considered all my relationships, the healthy ones, the less than healthy ones, because I think it gives me language, and I think it gives us language to start having the hard conversations about trust. Instead of just saying, I don't trust you, and that's this big blanket overarching statement. And addicts, remember, are often in such deep shame. Anything that's perceived as even a remote criticism you'll get defensiveness and blowback, and it can be so uncomfortable, and so sometimes when you can break this down this way, they might be able to hear in those conversations just a little bit better. So Braving is an acronym. The first part of Braving is B, and that's stands for boundaries. She says boundaries. I'm going to read her directly a quote because I think she says it so well, and I don't want to rip off what she says, but she says, boundaries are, I trust you if you are clear about your boundaries and you hold them, and you are clear about my boundaries and you respect them. There is no trust without boundaries. And that is true. I think it's super important to recognize boundaries, the very first element of trust. It'll be hard to have trust if we don't know what our own needs are, and we're able to express them, and we don't know what the needs and the lines and the limits are to somebody else. That's the very first fundamental thing we need to figure out. The challenge of setting boundaries is we have to let go of being liked. And we also have to let go of the fear of disappointing people, because people generally won't thank us or thank you or anybody for having a boundary, especially if they haven't had boundaries for themselves or set very good boundaries. And addicts do not have boundaries. That's how they got to addiction in the first place. So being able to decide what's okay and what's not okay with me and state that very clearly to somebody is so important, and such an important element of trust. It also, when we set boundaries, it will give us the ability to be more generous and loving with people that we're struggling with. Without those boundaries, we'll make all sorts of assumptions about why somebody's doing something, but we can be more generous and create more room for us to work in that relationship. So when we're talking to somebody, our partner, family, loved one, we can say, I'm really struggling to trust you around boundaries because you keep stepping over them. You keep doing things that cause pain, even though I've asked you not to. And that is an element of trust in our relationship that's really broken. And, I really need to, I would like for us to work on that, to improve that. So boundaries, number one, Braving. Number two, and if I need to stop for a question, I can. Please stop me. Reliability is the second element of trust. Reliability is really I can trust you if you do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, right? Reliability is like a scale. When I step on a scale and it reads the same number every time, that scale is reliable. I won't say what the number is. It's reliable. So doing what you say you're going to do, not just once, but every time, is super important. And sometimes the challenge is not to overcommit and overpromise just to please other people and prove that I'm okay. That's the struggle with reliability. So you can, with your partner or somebody that you love, you can say, I'm struggling with your reliability. You say you're going to do something and then you don't do it. How am I supposed to trust? You said you would be home every night this week by 5:30, and when you show up at 8 and have no explanation, or when you just inadvertently do what you want, even though you've promised or made a commitment to do that, it's going to break down trust for me. So your reliability, I'm struggling trusting your reliability. So there's some language I can use instead of just trust as a whole.
So there's a question. Absolutely. What do you do when you have set a boundary that is not honored? I feel like a broken record and my partner just does not understand my boundary.
That is a really good question. And it's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in this journey of healing. Because oftentimes neither have had good boundaries in the past for a variety of reasons. And so I'm showing up and drawing a line in the sand, and my partner, who isn't used to being or doesn't want, and especially if I'm in an active addiction or have been, I don't want to be told what to do. I will feel like you're controlling me. And I might hop over that. The caveat to boundaries is boundaries have to have a consequence. They have to have a consequence for breach. And this doesn't mean that I give an ultimatum and that I do, I say, if you do this, you have to do 100 push-ups. It's not like that. If I go back to my example that I just used about coming home late, if I say, I need you to be home at a certain time that would help me feel safe, or let me know where you are. Because if you stay out and you're not calling me, answering your phone, and I don't know where you are, I feel frightened and my trauma gets activated. So what I'm probably going to do when that happens, if it's past a certain time, is I'm going to lock up the house. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to leave it open and not know where you are, for my own safety. And then maybe we can talk about it. You'll have to find some place to go, and we'll talk about it in more, the next day. So that consequence isn't something that I force somebody else to do. It's always about my own safety and preservation, and my own self-care. So there's always breaches, and they should be those consequences should come very naturally. If you have to leave your house open all night and you don't feel safe doing that, locking the door would be a natural thing to do. It's not comfortable. And the person, partner, child, whoever might not like it, but it might be what I need to do for safety. So the answer to that question it sounds a little convoluted. I don't mean it to, but keep trying. Make sure that you're clear about the boundary. Make sure that it's for your safety only, that it's not to in any way control another person, manipulate, try and teach, try and help them see the error of their ways, anything sideways, that it's solely for safety and protection for you. And then if they won't be respectful, if they choose not to respect or be respectful of that need for safety for you, then I would get the need met in whatever way I needed to. And that's a hard thing.
One thing I've noticed too is, it's really easy to focus on how many times they break it. But if they happen to do it right, like if you can go, wow, thank you for doing that. It really, that was really important to me. Whatever. Like if anytime there's any positive thing to acknowledge, I know you shouldn't have to, but it's like one of those things where, I learned a long time ago, it doesn't cost me a lot to acknowledge something that, I'll use this. My husband is great. I mostly unload the dishwasher. When he does it, I say thank you. And like, should I have to? No. He doesn't when I do. I don't care. But like, I really appreciate that he did it. And it's just easy because then he does that. That's a really tame answer. Thing. But it was just like one of those things where I learned a long time ago that if I acknowledge, anything positive, that's good. Because otherwise I always just sound like I'm, why didn't you, whatever, and I'm not saying that you guys are, but I'm just saying what I found for myself is anytime I can have that moment of, if they did something and it honored a boundary, yay, and so that there's some balance. And then it also feels like they can't, well, they might, but, hopefully they would recognize that it isn't always one-sided, from that standpoint too.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And what I think you're talking about too, Tammy, is reinforcement. It's this way with those of you who have children.
Yeah.
Or animals or whatever. We reinforce the positive behavior by making sure we recognize it. And that's hard to do when we are feeling really hurt and angry. I will say that. The last thing you want to do is give the person who's breaking your heart or hurting you any sort of kudos for anything. And that's that's a natural feeling. That would be in my mind, I hate the word normal, but that would be a typical feeling. But the more you can validate and reinforce positive behavior, absolutely, the more you'll get. That's part of the rewiring system in the relationship. And I think it's okay to say, look, I've set these boundaries for my safety, and when you violate them, you have to know the natural consequence for that is less trust in, you know, in your respect for me and your desire to have me heal along with you and feel safe. Also, be sure you bounce your boundaries off of other people, your support system. Sometimes I've thought I've had just a superb boundary. I'm just going to, and I've had good people, great people around me like, nah, I don't know if that's a boundary. It sounds like we're really mad and you're trying to stop whatever from happening.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful for that feedback sometimes because it can get a little muddy and muddled. But I would say keep trying and keep getting support, and don't quit setting the boundaries or telling your partner or whoever your loved one is what you need. So thank you for that question. That was really good. Do you want me to keep going, or is there another?
Yeah, you're on A. So
Okay, so braving, we're on A. A is accountability. And accountability is an element of trust that's really important. So we, as a partner or family member, you have to know that what's important for you to know for trust is that if your partner makes a mistake, has a slip, does something that he or she shouldn't, or that is unhealthy, that they're willing to own it, they're willing to apologize for it, they're willing to make amends for it. That's accountability, taking responsibility for what we do. And we need to also, of course, for healthy building trust in our relationships, we need to do the same. You know, we need to make sure that we own our struggle. If, you know, and whatever our behavior is, good, bad, or otherwise, we need to take accountability for that. Accountability is really important because it will keep us out of blame and shame. If we can be accountable, we won't need to blame anybody else for what we've done. We're not going to shame anybody else. We're not going to go to shame. We're just going to own it, you know. And in the world of addiction, oftentimes that has to do with, you know, whatever that struggle is. If it's sex and I slipped with pornography, or if it's, you know, alcohol and I stopped by Circle K on my way home, whatever that is, like, we just, you know, maturing the trusting elements of our relationship require accountability. And that, I mean, that seems very obvious, but you could also communicate, I'm struggling because you aren't telling me when you're struggling, and how can I trust you if you're hiding from me? That's how this all happened in the first place. I need more transparency. I need more accountability. And you're going to have to work, both of you together, or the family unit, on creating a safe environment for very difficult truths sometimes to be shared. Addicts they don't say oftentimes, because they're so full of shame, they don't admit, and they don't want to hurt somebody, honestly. But what they don't know is what hurts the other person is their long-term dishonesty. So, you know, if you're the receiver of that truth, you have to authentically show up with your feeling, but you want to also work on helping to create that space where truth can happen, where honesty is safe, even when it's not fun to hear. And that's sometimes very hard too, when you're in a lot of pain. So that's accountability. We got to A. Do you want me to keep going, or do you have a question?
Please do. No, we're keep going. What's V?
What's V? All right, is everybody on bated breath? V is vault. And I love this concept as well. And she's talking about how important to build trust, we have to be safe with other people's information. We have to be a vault, meaning I need to know that I can come to you and tell you things and talk to you about maybe difficult things or about my truth, and you will hold that in confidence if I ask you to. And we need to be safe. And Brene also talks about the other side of the vault, which is holding other people's information in confidence when I'm speaking with someone else. She says, you know, that's part of being a trusting person, because if I go to my best friend and let her know what a friend that told me, another friend told me she's getting divorced, and I tell that to another friend, and without permission, I have automatically broken trust with both. And that's sometimes hard to see, because because I've broken the trust, obviously, of the friend that didn't want me to share, but I've also broken the trust of the person I'm sharing with, because I do not look very trustworthy giving information of somebody else. And so we really want to be able to identify that vault. And if I have a partner or a family member who I'm building and working on trust and they can't hold my confidence, that's going to be an element I want to look at. Or if I struggle to hold confidence, that's something I need to, be honest with myself about as I'm building those relationships. She says the challenge to the vault is not to hotwire connection and build closeness with others by talking bad about other people. She calls that false intimacy and false trust. And sometimes that can happen. It can happen in a family. It can happen in a friend group. It can happen even in a support group. I've seen it happen in a therapy group. Sometimes you have to have a safe place to talk about our anger and our hate even and our hurt. But we don't want the foundation of our relationships to be based on that solely. We don't want the only thing we have in common is that we hate the same thing or person or situation. We also want to build these other areas of trust, if that makes sense. So that's the vault.
So can I ask you, like if I perceive that I would have a difficult time holding something, I mean, it feels like I would do better to say, Kim, I'm not in a place where I can do that right now. So as much as, I love you, like, I can't take in more or whatever. So, but that's hard to do because you want to be there for somebody too. So
that's kind of what you're talking. Absolutely. I think that's the best thing to do. And it isn't easy. And there have been times in my life and when I just waterline is here. Here's the information and waterline is here. And it has nothing to do with my love or concern for somebody else. It's just, I can't input. I've maxed out for that at that time. So to me, that's a boundary. That's a self-care boundary. I love you and I would love to hear what you have to say. I can't probably take that in right now. Is there anyone else you could turn to? And then let's try and get together next week when I have a chance to, breathe over the weekend or something. So that's a really subtle, but that's a really powerful boundary. And knowing myself enough that I don't know if I can, this might spill over and I'm not in a good place right now. And maybe I should need to take care of myself. But I think that's thank you. So important. Absolutely. And then really quick, non-judgment is the N part of braving. I need to be able to fall apart and be in my struggle and not be judged by you, by another person. And I need to be able to be, and you need to be able to be in struggle and not be judged by me. We need to be able to have this reciprocity in a relationship where we're not judging each other. Also, that I'm really, I don't judge you for asking for help, and I don't judge myself for needing help either. That's really important. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I have the hardest time. It's so much easier for me to give help than receive it. And sometimes we identify too heavily with being the fixer or the helper, and we need to work, if that's my role in life, and that was certainly mine, then I have to work on reciprocity in my relationships and being vulnerable myself, or that trust won't be equal. And we won't have that. It will feel like I'm showing up always as the here, let me help you. And so we need to be able to have that vulnerable reciprocity of experiences in trusting relationships, but we don't want to feel judged when we're doing it. I've run a lot of partners groups, and that when I ask them, when I'm addressing the group and I say, what do you need for safety in order to maybe show up and talk about whatever it is you need to talk about? And almost always they'll say, I don't want to be judged. Please don't judge my story. Don't judge I don't need anybody else judging my husband or my child. I just need you to support me in what I'm going through. So non-judgment, really important.
I think it's really challenging if, for the loved ones too, because they kind of circle the wagons and go, well, I'm your sister, Kim, so therefore I'm going to say you're right and he's all wrong, and you should just leave him, and all of that comes into play, and it gets to be challenging, and then it's hard for you to be able to talk about it to someone who can just listen and be the vault and hold the space without without fixing it.
That's right. That is so true. Thank you. Okay, so the I is integrity, which I think, oh no, wait, did I do I? Did I skip I? I did.
You skipped I. I was going to ask you if there was one for I. So yeah, so we're going to do them slightly out of order, but it's all good. So
integrity, embracing I is integrity, which to me kind of goes without saying, but it's an element of trust. That is, if you act from a place, you do what you say you believe. You act according to your own belief systems, your own moral compass. You're true to what you believe, and what you do match. That's acting out of a place of integrity. So it's not standing up in church on Sunday and giving all the right Sunday school answers and about the evils of pornography, and then, and not understanding addiction takes time to heal, but that I'm working on my congruency. I'm working on being integral with my belief system. I love what Brene says. She says, having integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and practicing, not just professing, our values. And I think that is really profound, because sometimes it might be easier, it might be easy just to go along with something that I don't believe, or I don't, because it's easier, and I don't want to, again, upset the apple cart. But so important that we act out of our integrity. So, and when I'm communicating trust with my partner or my family, I can say, I'm struggling with the integrity piece. You say this, but you do this, and I don't know how to trust that. And I there's some room in there for you to be imperfect, for sure, because I'm not always full of integrity either. But I really want our relationship to grow in this way. I want you to know that you can tell me, number one, you can account for what it is that you're struggling with, and number two, that you will strive to act in your integrity. That will help me trust that part of who you are when it's been injured. And most times when you're living with an addict, or that's a huge breakdown in integrity, because if I've been lied to, then something's been presented that's not exactly how it is. So integrity is a big piece of that. The last one.
Hang on a second, because I want to jump in on the integrity. Dr. Rob created the company called Seeking Integrity, and we talk about that. We know that we will fall short, but we are always going to strive for integrity. And everything that we do, from the things that are on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com, website, to the treatment program for men with sex addiction and intimacy disorders, or the co-occurring, we align with that. And so yes, the integrity is so important. But again, like you said, we're human and we're not going to make it, but it's the striving for, it's the seeking.
Yes, absolutely. I love the name of the company for that. That drew me right in when I saw that. I was like, yes, we need more of that. I need more of that. The last part of braving is the G, which is generosity. I kind of touched on this when we first started today, but we can only have a trusting relationship if we can assume the most generous thing. If you will assume the most generous thing about my words, my actions, and my behaviors, and then check in with me about them. So that goes back to boundaries. It goes back to all those elements of trusting we talked about. I think all of us want others to make the most generous assumption about us. I think I could probably safely say that. Most of us don't want to be judged. We don't want people to think something, we're weirdos or whatever. We want generosity. And the way we get to the G in braving is all those other elements working in sync to build trust. Then I can automatically, I can put away all of the fear and doubt and all of that, and I can go to generosity. He or she probably didn't mean it that way. I know that's not who they really are. They do strive. They have done these things right. And I think when we can do that, we know we are building trust. We are starting to rebuild, and work on those elements of trust that have been broken, usually really severely in these relationships. And you may have a partner who's unbelievable at accountability, but really struggles with reliability. And that's possible. So that's why I think breaking it down, so we're not saying you're all this and all that, is so helpful. And it de-shames our relationship. It de-shames our own individual experience. And when we can do that, we can show up and we can work. We can, like she said, get more courageous, get in the arena and go at it and figure out how to get better. So that was my little thing for the day.
Well, there's some really great comments, so I'm going to read through these. Through the process of recovery as a partner of an addict, it is important to identify who your marble jar friends are.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that a moment?
I just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Using the Braving acronym is so helpful in the identification process.
Right. And she does talk about that in the, she does a talk for a university where she talks about Braving, and I think it's in her book as well. I don't remember, but she calls it the marble jar friend, being really those friends that you have those kind of relationships with. And we want to add to that always. Find people in our lives that we can have these kind of trusting relationships with. And if that person who made the comment has more to say about that, please put it in there.
Well, I was thinking when I was listening to this that, and the marble jar is really helpful, so I appreciate the chime in on that. But, because I was thinking this doesn't just apply to your partners or, your very close loved one. This is really, who is trustworthy and how do you identify who are safe people in your life? And I was thinking there's a recent situation where, like there would be no way, for this particular situation to rebuild trust because they are not trustworthy. They would not ever get in the marble jar, so. But looking at this and seeing that is helpful. I think the other thing when you first started talking about this, I thought, I do have different levels of relationships with different people, and there are people that I guess we would call them the marble jar people that are right in here with me. But there's other people that I can only trust with so much just because that's who they are and how our relationship is, and that's okay as long as I understand that they are not safe to be in the marble jar with me.
That's right. That's right. And we won't find, we have to collect those. I think marbles is a really good metaphor for that, because I think we collect them. And for me, I collect them slowly over the years. I'm pretty old, and some, unfortunately, I've lost, and then some I've kept forever. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think we always want to be collecting those kind of trusting people in our life where we can just we can have all those elements and feel so safe. But I also think it's possible to build that kind of trust even a relationship that's been wounded. Oftentimes we didn't know how to do it. We haven't known. But if both people are willing, I believe that can work.
Yeah, I think that's the key. She adds, it's trial and error process to find the marble jar friends. And I think that's really true. And I think the more that we learn about ourselves and how we can show up for people, that helps us define who should be in our jars.
For sure.
So she adds, Brene would ask you to check in with your own self-trust if you are having trouble being the receiver.
That is so true. That's the thing I think I love the most about Brene, and I think I've learned the most on my own journey of healing is everything, my grandma would say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. A relationship is not a one-sided trust, even if it's been broken one-sided, if that makes sense. If that trust has been really injured more by one party than the other in a variety of ways. I just think whatever I want from my relationships, I want to make sure that my own self-trust is intact, that I'm really checking in on those things with myself as well. Because sometimes when we're injured, we're not always when we're in trauma, we're not always in our frontal cortex, I'm thinking, and sometimes we may act in ways that we wouldn't have acted before. Things we may say or do things that I wouldn't have dreamed of doing before all this happened or before I found out what was going on. And you want to have grace and generosity with yourself about that. But the last thing I think probably most want to do is stay stuck there. It's a pretty painful place to be. So get the help, the support, find those marble jar friends that you can work and practice some of these things with. I love that. I just don't think they come around every day, but I think they'll come. If we're living that way, I just think we invite that into our lives. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do too. And I think, for partners that have been betrayed, it's tough to trust yourself because, there's so much gaslighting that goes on. You've been lied to so much and, you're going like, well, is that really true? Or, I mean, so I think it's a process to learn that self-trust again, that, to own what your guts are saying is probably right.
That is so true. I always say that the healing journey for a partner is not about necessarily all about learning to trust the addict or the offending party in the relationship. It's a lot about learning how to trust yourself so that you can see things more clearly. And when you've been gaslighted and lied to and deceived and, you've been going through this cycle, it's hard to trust yourself because you probably had those feelings along the way. Something's not right. That doesn't feel right. And then when you confront it, you're confronted with, that's insane. Why would you think that? And so I always say to the partners I work with, that sixth sense is there for a reason. And learning to trust that again is a part of that journey. And it may or may not resonate for the addict or the person who's struggling, but it doesn't mean your sixth sense is necessarily off. So when my sixth sense may go off about something, I find one of my friends and say, this is what I'm feeling. What do you think? And do I sound crazy? And learning to trust that is so, so important. And long-term will be the greatest recovering piece of a partner's heart that she or he will recover, is that sense and being able to trust that sense.
Yeah, there's a comment, it's about learning to retrust your gut because you learn to ignore your gut when you've been gaslighted for so long.
So true. And that's part of unfortunately, that's not even solely in addicted relationships, that happens in any relationship frequently, because for whatever reason, we're not in that braving space. We're not, showing up with integrity and, accountability and reliability, and we're not setting healthy boundaries. So I love that breakdown because I think if I focus that way, it gives me something to look at, not just big, broad. How do I rebuild trust? That sounds like building a mansion in a day to me. I don't know. That just sounds overwhelming. And most people are like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust again. And that may be true. There may be elements of that never recover because you can't get there, or maybe your partner is unwilling to go there. But there's still a valuable thing to consider. So you have the language to communicate that very clearly. And with addicts, they need to hear it very clear, and very, this is what's happening, and this is how I'm feeling, and this is why I'm not trusting. Here are these elements that are breaking down for me.
But I love that it, rather than you never or you always, or it's just so all encompassing, because it does feel overwhelming for both sides. I'm sure that, that it's like, I'll never be able to trust this relationship, and the shame of like, I'm so untrustworthy. But if you go, well, okay, doing okay with this and doing okay with that, but this one really needs some attention. And maybe it's just like what needs the most attention, and pick one piece to work on and see if there's some progress in that, and then pick the next most challenging one or something. But maybe it's just like, okay, I start seeing a little bit of progress with this, so maybe there's hope for all of this. Someone chimes in, this is so timely, thank you. My SA partner gaslighted me for 8 years, saying a friend was just an AA sponsor. Now 14 years later, he said your gut was right. Ouch. Ooh, that is painful. I'm so sorry.
That is so painful. And, but I think maybe one thing you can glean off of that is that even though it doesn't feel good probably right now, and when you found out, is that you did know, like there was something inside of you. So it doesn't mean you will never be lied to again. It doesn't mean you'll never be gaslighted again, but you may just listen to that instinct, that voice, that part of you that feels off. Something just feels off. And I might be braver. I might have more bravery in leaning in there, more courage to lean in and say, maybe things are okay, but for right now, I'm not feeling it for whatever reason, and give myself time to sort that out. Yeah, that stinks.
And there's a comment from our Brene Brown aficionado. So thank you for being here. It was like perfect timing. Generosity helps me to have compassion toward my partner, knowing that he is really learning how to overcome his own brokenness, and it is his trauma speaking. And that's really great insight.
That is really profound, and it takes a while to get there. So if some of you are like,
heck no, yeah.
I don't care, I'm mad, that's okay to be there too. But over time, I agree that generosity, being able, if I set the boundaries and I'm clear about it and I'm able to hold and take care of myself, I can make those generous assumptions, and I can see the wound in my partner. It's not just he or she's out to get me, because it feels like that oftentimes in those early stages, particularly if right after finding out. But over time, you start to see this. They don't probably wake up every day wondering how they can injure you today. You know, they don't have this. Most don't have a diabolical, malicious need to hurt anybody. They don't have good boundaries. They haven't established healthy patterns in their life and steadiness. They don't know how to deal with emotional disruption and the ups and downs of life in a healthy way. They've learned how to medicate that in a certain way that causes harm. Number one, to them. And then comes the wake of destruction, that it leaves behind them. So, but that takes time. It's okay if you can't see that. It's okay if you don't want to. I think over time, as you work and heal, whether or not you stay in the relationship, it comes. And then I don't take it so personally and internalize things quite so heavily.
I think what you shared at the beginning too about, this is the executive part of my brain and this is the I always call it the reptile part of my brain that, and when you're talking about the addiction is back here, like breathing, I thought, wow, that's really, because you do ask an addict, why did you do that or whatever, what were you thinking? And there's nothing like, I wasn't thinking, but all I was focusing on was, getting out of the pain. I'm on a couple of Facebook groups with addicts and stuff like that. And a lot of them are in early recovery and the pain is palpable in some of the posts. I want to act out so badly. This is all forms of addiction, but they want to go use so badly because they just can't stand being in whatever it is. And it isn't always like that there's a bad thing going on. It's like, I'm just so uncomfortable in any kind of emotion, any kind of situation. I have no coping skills. And I know that acting out is going to take that away, even for the moment. It's going to be the fix for the moment, and then I'll have to deal with the other later. Or they don't even probably think about that. It's just like, I just need a fix now because I can't stand it right now.
Right, because the part of the brain is the fight, flight, or freeze. It's the survival brain. I have a colleague that I work with whose son was in the pool with a best friend when they were children, like 11 or 12. And one got in the deep end and got tired and started to drown. Oh, wow. And he immediately grabbed my colleague's son and started to push him under because he couldn't breathe. And eventually people saw what was happening and pulled them out. But when they pulled him out of the pool, my friend's son just had claw marks, down his back. And those boys were best friends. The one would have never hurt the other one, except he was fighting to breathe, to survive. And it's hard to understand, but when an addict is in the limbic part of their brain, it feels like they'll die if they don't get relief, if that makes sense. And oftentimes when a partner's in the limbic brain, it feels like it feels that scary too. So there's not a lot of thought going on, if any, higher thinking going on when I am activated in trauma or I'm activated in my need to use or my addiction. It's just feel better now. in whatever way I need to do that. And for an addict, they'll use, or they'll, and sometimes partners will go into self-hatred, maybe rage, maybe, I'll overeat, or I'll get on Amazon Prime and buy everything or whatever. There's ways, there's things, and we may develop healthy patterns. And a lot of what we do from a prodependent perspective is just rewire and make sure to solidify the healthy behaviors that you probably already have or have had, and keep those patterns going so you can manage the emotional disruption that happens in these situations better. Doesn't make it all go away, but it helps you to be able to function, day to day, and take care of your life, your job, your family, whatever responsibilities you have, even though the winds are blowing really hard around you. So that's really, really important to remember, that limbic brain activation is a real thing, and getting out of that takes real concerted effort. But over time, as I use new tools, we call it neural pathways. I start to blaze new pathways in my brain. For an addict, then, alcohol or cocaine or pornography or masturbating or whatever, those things you start to grow weeds on those neural pathways. They don't become as strong as I grow new ones. And they're like highways in our brain. I feel mad, I feel sad, I go straight to what I know. But as we start going, I feel mad, oh, I can call a friend. Or I feel sad, I can go for a walk, or I can do, like, there's other options, and I start to rewire that part of my brain. I start to heal, and it starts to be less of a pull to go back to those unhealthy behaviors. And how long that takes is individual, case by case basis. There's no rule that I know. I don't know any two people that are the same or have been the same. And some partners could stick it out and wait for that, and some can't, and that's okay too. I think there's no right or wrong way to be in these situations. You just need to get the help you need to stabilize as much as you can while you work through the trauma.
Yeah, I was thinking while you're talking too, it's like I want to be able to act rather than react. And so if I have it up here, and I can think it through on any level. Here it's just an action. I'm just reacting to whatever it is. I'm angry, I'm sad, where I do like to have choices, and I like when I can go, well, okay, I'm not happy right now. What are my choices, and what can I do? And I've shared this in other webinars too, but for me, learning the serenity prayer, and it makes me slow down. It's almost like a mindfulness thing, but it reminds me I have no control over anyone else or anything else. All I can do is control. It's not even control. I can choose my actions or reactions. And so just whatever works for anybody, but for me, that was really helpful because it gave me that pause to probably move it from here to here. And I need that pause. So
that's right. We all do, because sometimes those knee-jerk reactions aren't the ones we wanted.
Right. And just get me into a bigger stew. So
what we do in recovery and healing is we're building emotional tolerance. We're learning how to deal with and stay with ourselves and our pain, or ourselves and our uncomfortable emotion. It's like me in the gym. If I got off the treadmill every time I felt uncomfortable, I would never build the tolerance my muscles would never grow, and I would be unhealthy. So emotions are the same way. We have to get on the treadmill, and we have to not let ourselves get off just because we're uncomfortable. We have to learn how to build that part of us that can be in that and still function. And that's not easy, and for an addict, it's really, really hard. And sometimes for a partner, it can be hard too, but keep at it. It's worth it. It really is. And you're worth it.
And with that, we're out of time. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all for being here and contributing. That was a great discussion. And I appreciate the Brene aficionado is in the mental health profession, but has also been on the partner side of it too. So, but thank you all. It was very helpful. I've got notes I'm going to refer back to. So.
We'll be here again next week, next Friday. So please come back and join us. We'd love to have you back. And come with questions if you have any.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. See you.